even better, isn't it?
Good evening. Yes, it is. Did you have to do that manually?
I figured out now how.
Okay.
But I won't tell.
Okay.
It's my knowledge.
Everybody, thank you for joining us on week 10 on figuring out how to do intros on Restream.
We are very close to it right now. Very, very close.
Very close.
So I
Hey,
would start.
Adrian.
We
That was
quickly
smooth.
restart and just try it again.
But it was smooth. Oh, you want to end the stream now? Hit the red button and do the intro again. Hello, everybody. Hello, Adrian. How are you doing?
Hello, Dennis. I'm doing fine. So I was reading the title of today, like MESSY Codebase. I never had a MESSY Codebase. How do they actually look like?
Like your code base.
Okay.
That's what
So that is what messy means.
So generally, I was really inspired by this conversation between, I think it was Jess Humble and Dave Farley, I believe, discussing something else, continuous integration, I think, or something else. But generally, this idea that with regards to the continuous integration, TDD, mobbing, ensembling, etc., how to do product engineering rather than just a feature factory, all of these concepts, our industry is sort of not really somewhere in the middle, but super polarized on either end. Some people think that TDD, for example, is impossible, and some people think that that it's so obvious that it seems crazy not to do it for nearly everything. And there's very few people in the middle, right? So it's just this like very polarized sort of echo chamber on both sides. And I think everybody who is sort of a TDDer have been in both. And usually it requires a bridge if you as a TDDer come into a non-TDDer organization, or a organization that is sort of recruiting TDDers, but the organization itself is not ready for it. Or if you're a TDDer recruiting somebody who's not a TDDer, there's usually something going wrong. Something is sticky. Something just doesn't click. So I've become very, very good at like this sort of bridge building. So I decided to devote a OTJ episode to that, and with your help, I think we can help our viewers figure it out. So to just gamify it a little bit, I'm happy adopting the non-TDDer hat. If you would adopt the TDDer hat, and if somebody in the audience, hi, if you're live or if you're watching the recording, if you'd also say in which camp you'd like to play, to give you some advice about how to steelman the other case or how to sort of build the bridge from either side. And I think that would be like a fun, easy exercise that you can pick up, not so much on TDD skill, because TDD is easy, but more so about change management. Change management in the organization. So how to drive such an initiative, how to pick up on the signs that it might be too much, too early, or late, and we need to do it, but we don't know how, right? So these are generally the 4 signals that you need to watch out for. So yeah, what do you think?
First of all, I think that's a leadership topic. That's where I feel my role a little bit today. So why do I think it's a leadership topic? Because when we think of how we can change cultures in a company, so for example, a culture which is driven by we need to make sure that we have a mature system, a system where quality is already part of the process or not a step in the process, where we need to, when we want to have those things, we need to have a culture which actually wants to have that out of intrinsic motivation, because the discipline level of each person is that high that we need to have that. The problem is when you are one of like 10 people who thinks I want to have such a topic like that right now, I want to improve the quality and make it part of a process, then you need to be very loud and you need to fight against a lot of people. right? Because what you do is you fight resistance of change or resistance to change, however you want to call it. And because people don't want to change, and this is what I see basically on every conference when I speak on meetups or something like that, and people ask about TDD. So it's not like I make TDD topics, but people come to the point of TDD, and then we discuss TDD, and it's always the same. It's like, I heard of that, but I can't imagine
Mm-hmm.
it's actually working. Why should I write the test first? Those kind of things. So it is about this resistance. It is like you find reasons not to do this instead of finding reasons to do this, and that is especially when you have the more people think like that, those resistance entities, they team up together against you. And that is one of the
Mm-hmm.
which makes it extremely hard from bottom up to actually cultivate this culture, which
Yeah.
because you're a single person and you need to have a very strong character, you need to be endurant, you need to have a lot of self-discipline, self-confidence, and yeah, it's a lot. Let's say it's a lot about circumstances. So if you have a team which is willing to listen to it, might be possible. If you have a team full of alpha people, no one likes each other, it's basically impossible. Which I say that you need to have that in the upper management role where people say like, we want to be fast in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
In the same moment, we want to have quality. We want to have what we back in the days called agile, based on the Agile Manifesto.
Hey, let's not go there.
No, I'm just saying we want to have that. We want to have that also business perspective. But we want to be able to practice that kind of stuff. So we want to react to things happen on the market with the clients currently. Then we need to have that. So we need to foster an environment where this is actually working, and that means that we need to live that already as role models from top down. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And even then, it's hard to do that because you still face the resistance of the people, but
Mm-hmm.
you actually are in a position where it's much easier to change these kind of things towards that kind of or direction of that kind of culture, which is necessary to be willing to do that. So, in fact, it all comes down to what we always do in coachings and mentorings. It's how to break resistance in order to progress. And that's one of the points is when you say it like this, one of the common things is, yeah, okay, but that assumes that TDD is the right way to go, and we think it's not.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the first big resistance clash. It's not like it
So
is
let
not
me
like it is clear that we need to do that.
let me play out the situation, right? For example, you're in an organization, everybody thinks TDD is great, but for some reason it's not happening. I would put that firmly into the non-TDDer camp, right? So it's like you can say whatever you want about TDD. It can be great. It can be, yes, we understand it. We tried it, whatever.
Mhm.
If you're not actively practicing it without managerial pressure, I would put you in the non-TDDer camp. Like for some reason, it's just not obvious to you that this is a good way of building software. Right? So a lot of people aren't even aware in which camp they are. There's a lot of engineers out there who say, I want to learn TDD. I believe in TDD. I love TDD. And then they go to work and they don't do TDD. Like, to me, that is a non-TDDer who's faking the TDD affiliation, right? Because they think they just don't understand TDD well enough to apply it in their MESSY Codebase. The MESSY Codebase is just a metaphor. It has nothing to do with MESSY Codebase, right? It might just be stigma attached to it in this organization. Or it might just be that they don't know how to work in legacy software, right? They just don't know how to build something that isn't a copy paste of something that was already there, right? So it can be very sticky, very complicated, very quickly. And if you're not realistic or at least grounded in your beliefs about which camp you belong to, you might close the door on both sides. TDDers will say, yeah, you say you understand TDD, but you don't practice it, so why should I listen to you? Non-TDDers might say, yeah, like you say you're a TDDer, so we should have treat you as that other thing, but you could write code just as much without tests as we are. So,
but let's be honest now. If you have a team of 5 developers in a team, right? So let's stick with the team level. 5 developer accumulated 100 years of experience together, right? So it's a mix of seniors, juniors, and these kind of things. So I assume There are all smart people. So technically, averse smart people. So the people can use technology. They know how to.
Yeah.
And the point is, there is, for me, no valid reason to assume that these people couldn't find a way to implement TDD.
Of
So
course, of course. So
there's no
you're.
issue technical wise. There is no hard skill issue here. The issue is,
Oh no, no, no. I would say it's definitely a hard skill issue, but not a TDD skill issue.
yeah, yeah, let's define what hard skills in that moment means. But what I mean by that is, it is not the, let's say, the practical intelligence, the intelligence of what people actually do in their art to actually do this. So you don't need to do this perfectly from day one, but you can start and say, okay, I do write my first test up front. That is not hard. You can just do that. And that is where you start.
I would disagree with that. Again, me representing the non-TDDR
Yeah,
camp,
but
that what you just said, that is impossible. For
no,
the camp that I'm representing,
that is exactly the point.
yes.
That is resistance, not Dennis. That is
Yeah.
that is the ego of Dennis speaking to me in that moment. That is the subconscious part who tries to avoid change.
Sure, it's a good metaphor.
Exactly. That is what actually talks to me.
Okay, so let's break this down. So you say ego, resistance to change, defensiveness, excuse making, and just perhaps pragmatism. Perhaps, this will slow me down so much that there's no way I can sell it at work. All of these things. So this is your target audience. How do you build a bridge? Right. So I am conscious of that. The idea that I picked up from Jason Gorman, who is also a fellow TDD coach. Jason says, I don't teach TDD to people who don't want to learn TDD.
Yeah.
So, but that is a subset of the group that I now represent.
Yeah.
Right. So the group that I represent is very wide. It also includes people who think TDD is great, but they don't practice it. But I'm not building a bridge with those people who are so against it that they think it's stupid. They don't want to learn it. They don't need to learn it. They have no incentive to learn it. They're not even interested. They think it's a waste of time even to discuss it. And the only reason they're here is because they're so against it that they want to start a flame war in chat.
The most easiest way to actually implement this is by top down, making an incentive. You keep your job if you're doing that. If not, you go. That's the easiest way.
I would question that. So I would challenge that, because I tried that and it doesn't work. It works.
I say it is.
It works. It's easy. It's simple, but it's quite.
It is disturbing.
Ineffective. It's quite ineffective. It's quite ineffective.
It is, but it is the easiest way to get to the point and start a change.
It's easy. Yes, it's easy. It's easy to start changing stuff, but it has
basically
a lot of
Work.
negative. It can work. It has a lot of negative, sticky consequences.
Yeah, because it can go sideways. That's one of the issues, because you open up a lot of changes at the same time, not just that particular one.
It's not optimized for learning. So whenever there's some issue caused by TDD, the manager who forced it gets all the blame for, like, yeah, but this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't pushed for TDD. And then
no, so it is of course a little bit short-sighted. What you can do is, but you can have the same goal. Like, that is a vision. So if you need to decide on some point the commander's intent, the idea of, I need to do this right now. So we need to do this as a company. So if you define that as a CTO, you need to get to the. So you can't just ask the people. If we are here, it is actually not a company. It is not like we are a group of hobbyists who decide what we do as a group. That is not how things work, and we shouldn't do this. And I'm totally in this camp right now, because what I saw is I wasted so much time in my life trying to convince people who never wanted to be convinced, and I don't do this anymore.
Exactly.
I don't do this anymore.
And I agree. That is a complete waste of time.
So give the people the chance to change.
Yes.
Or change them.
So we're not directly addressing that group of people.
Yeah.
Those people are a very small but vocal minority in the non-practicing camp, and this is not intended for them. But they already know that. It is intended for that large silent majority of people who would who follow our channel, who follow people like Paul Hammond, who follow people like Dave Farley, Kent Beck, Martin Fowler.
I tell you something, because those people represent something very specific. So especially when you take a look at Brian Finster and these kind of people who really say that, okay, I'm coming from an area where a lot of bad things going on, a lot of quality issues, a lot of alarm things in the night, those kind of things, being afraid to deploy. So if we want to be a company who doesn't have these problems, and you actively say, I'm against TDD, but I don't want to change anyway, anywhere, then you need to go. There's first of all, there is no space of negotiation. So if you're against the mission and the progress of a company,
I like that you're taking your role very seriously as the pro TDD.
No, it's not. That is not specifically to TDD. That's my entire understanding.
I know.
If someone is really saying,
you.
So just see it reversely. So you hire a person on some point in time for a specific role with specific specifications. And then on some point in time, the specifications change because the environment changed, because the company needs to change in order to survive. And the person says, no, 3 years ago, you have hired me because of this and that. And then, well, it is not compatible anymore. That is the reality. If you are an employed person, then you need to understand that employment means to some degree that you are not 100% free person. Otherwise, you need to become an entrepreneur and do it yourself.
I'm losing the plot here. So you're losing me on. Do we have?
Is this normal for TDD deniers?
I think this was 20% waffle, because you're so pro TDD that you would put it into somebody's contract and you would treat their resistance to being open to TDD as a contractual violation.
If you see that here now in this role playing, maybe yes, but
yes,
me as
yes.
a person,
so
me as a person, as a real person, I would put progress, stability, maturity, and quality in the NFRs of the role, right? In the non-functional requirements. And if we don't have an alternative way which works for TDD, and let's say the management decides that TDD is the way to go because we are developers ourselves and we try to implement this, and we see clear resistance, which is not only just mental resistance, but it becomes physical resistance, then we need to act as management. That's the first point. So we need to rule out that actually people fighting us in our own company. That is a no. That is not allowed to happen. Employment is employment, period, right? So, and then we get to the.
But there is the chance that you in the management team are wrong about you're right about the content, but wrong about the way that you have communicated it.
This is what I said, alternative. So people need to come up with alternatives then, because the NFRs was said.
Or you're communicating, we need TDD, but at the same time, you're communicating that you need something else much, much more urgently and much, much more importantly. So even though you have voiced the need, you have also at the same time voiced a stronger need to be more pragmatic on, I don't know, roadmap objectives.
Yeah, but come on. So why do we talk about TDD? So when we go into a discussion about like a management person, like a CTO is coming one day and says, we need to do TDD now. And everyone, why? And I listened to a video stream of Dennis. He said, we need to do this. And Paul as well. And Brian Finster. And then all the developers like, but why? We don't have problems. And then, but we need to do this. This is not real. So exactly. And the point is, you don't start with, we need to do TDD because I saw a video. You start about, we have a load of issues here and we need to find solutions. And if you're at the point that someone is suggesting, especially from the leadership, ideally from leadership, that we need to change something regarding something with TDD in order to face that, that should trigger not resistance, or it can trigger a little bit of resistance in form of counter hypothesis, like we can do this as well in order to make this better. So we have a discussion. We can debate similar, multiple hypotheses. Great. Let's figure out which is the best one. In most cases, TDD wins. In some cases, maybe not. It's okay for me to do that, right? But I want to have that discussion. If I just get physical resistance and no alternatives while we have problems, someone is fighting against the company. That's simply the case in that moment. And this is what my big first point was. And on some point in time, we need to move towards the second phase, which is we have the people who say, we understand we have a problem and we need to find the best way. Let's do this together. And this is where leadership comes in. The part I mentioned before is not leadership. That is actually management. That is making sure the frame is working. But then we need to go to leadership on some point in time, which means you need to work together with the people, with their mindsets. You need to shape cultures to make that actually happen. Because what we don't want to do is actually dictating things. But nonetheless, we need to create a frame which is non-negotiable. So we are a company. So there's money, there is people are counting on salaries, these kind of things. So we cannot just leave it to the subconscious minds of everyone who's working there in a company with 50 people. That doesn't work at all. So you need to have a general direction.
So if I'm representing the anti-camp, right? So you said you need to have a general direction. In that general direction, that, hey Grant, it's been a while. Why can I not see Grant's messages?
Make TDD for TDD. So
no,
test implement.
Adrian, why can I not see Grant's messages in the studio?
It's I see them.
You see them. Okay. Okay. So it's just me.
I see them in both clients I have right now. In my split brain.
I hate having chat issues. I hate having chat issues. Okay.
Maybe Grant joined my version and so you don't see it?
Okay. I hope that's the reason. I really hope that's the reason. Fair. So again, sorry, I just get triggered by our constant technical issues that now it's okay. So and the anti-camp, what I like to do is, especially when I'm sort of helping a TDD adjacent but like a non-practicing team, what I like to do especially is like interface somewhere between the staff engineers, senior engineers, and the CTO, and carve out a little safe space to run an experiment. Because generally speaking, the outcomes that we want for which we say TDD is the solution for, TDD is not the only solution in that space.
Yes.
There are a lot of alternatives to TDD that are very different from TDD, actually. There are a lot of front-loaded, sort of specification-based or testing-based. So there are a lot of alternatives to TDD that don't have you writing tests. They still have you writing specifications. So, for example, event modeling or some kind of more spec-driven flow that doesn't do Gherkin or BDD or TDD in some form. It just so happens that TDD is, technologically speaking, the simplest, in my experience. Right? So generally, when I get like a really defensive team, I don't talk about TDD. I talk about the outcomes that we want, the results that we want, and I then have them pick between the three obvious solutions. And TDD generally lands as the obvious solution. So even though they're against, once they see the alternatives and our conviction of getting those outcomes, they're like, okay, well, if you really want that, then yes, then for that, TDD is sort of the simplest, sort of the least bad thing that we can add to our workflow. And that is already a huge step up in change management, because if the team is resistant, they will be less resistant to the idea if they had some agency in choosing it, right? So
that's the point. What I want to say by point 2. right? The first point is about creating a frame for that. And the second point is to say, okay, you acknowledge that we have an issue, right? Not the
Mm-hmm.
wish to implement TDD. We have the issue with quality and continuity, right? And so please, team, find something out. A suggestion is TDD. Please come up with hypotheses, because we have specific specialists on the team. We might have a more like a more ops person, we have more dev person, we have a more front end person, more back end person. Testing
Yeah.
front end and back end is different. Testing infrastructure even more. And
Data
so
science is different. If you have,
exactly. So
for
come up with
example,
a
with
solution as a
evals
team.
for AI or evals for LLMs is very popular.
Exactly.
It is still coming from that camp of like spec driven, test driven sense making about what desired behaviors you want, even if they're fuzzy. Even if the desired behavior has a component that is fuzzy, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, if you'd have to test run a casino, most of the casino's outputs are fuzzy, but you have some specifications about how the fuzzy, like how fuzzy we allow it to be, and what is the noise ratio on the fuzziness, and is it fuzzy fairly for everybody the same way? Um, doesn't mean that it cannot be sort of front loaded with the same kind of benefits. Um, so my first sort of contra argument here is that yes, it's okay to be against TDD if we want the overall benefits, and the overall benefits would be that we have better synchronization between the team about having a written down document of what correct behavior represents.
Yes.
Right? So correct behavior doesn't need to be a test. Correct behavior could be a specification. It could be an event model. The correct behavior could be expressed in some other, a Miro board with your own special format that is like proprietary or company specific. Or you might be a data-driven platform, and within your platform there are like some key interfaces, and you're just communicating in those key interfaces. For example, you might be in e-commerce, and there's a special way of how you handle a special kind of discount, and that's the spec, right? So we can still be talking about a spec-driven or be written down something, or modeled or visualized something, as long as it impacts directly how the code is being written, designed, and that it is in some way executable. Right? So the one of the key guarantees that we want from TDD and TDD-like processes is that it ends up with software that is essentially self-testing, so that you can spin up the software in some kind of, we usually call it CI environment, but it has nothing to do with CI, that we are spinning up the software in some kind of test environment so that the software can diagnose itself, with the intent of, if there's something wrong, the software can tell you what is wrong. Not just that there is something wrong.
It is not according to the specifications you have set. You
And
can't
it
really
will
tell
tell
it
you which
100% right or
and
wrong.
it will tell you exactly which specifications, rather than just no. So those are the primary benefits, right? If there's something wrong with the software, please tell me what exactly is wrong about it, right? Which is contrary to regression tests, right? So a lot of people think that that's what regression tests are. So tests written after implementation, end-to-end tests notoriously fall into this camp as like a clear outlier, because they are very hard to write, they are very flaky, they are very expensive to maintain, and they practically give you no practical signal other than something doesn't work. Because end-to-end tests and regression tests, they don't tell you where the problem is. They don't tell you where you need to go to fix the problem. They don't isolate and localize the issue. They just tell you, very like flaky but high likelihood of something not working, something mission critical not working, which is not really useful, because if the signal is wrong, it will send the devs down the rabbit hole, which means they will do it the first time. The second time they're like, but what if it's a false negative again? And then let's ignore it, let's do it later. I don't have time for this right now. Then they start not taking the test suite seriously, blah 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 blah. You've seen it. I don't want to talk about that specifically. So, there are multiple solutions. TDD is not the only answer here. We're just using it as an example to really... The ultimate goal that we want is self-testing code. It's code that can diagnose itself. TDD tends to be the simplest one when it comes to execution. It also tends to be the one that requires the most discipline, which is, I think, where the main issues come from.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why a team would not want to adopt TDD. It's like, hey, it requires a lot of discipline. I'm already under pressure. If I'm now using my discipline battery to apply TDD to this code base, I will put myself under more pressure. If I have the choice, I will choose not to do that, especially if I'm being paid, if I'm being financially incentivized to cater to that managerial pressure coming from like upstream, from like project managers, right? That aren't engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing I would like to add is that if you're in anti or sort of against or adversarial sort of TDD team, I would definitely say managerial pressure doesn't work. Managerial pressure is like is sort of coming more from that camp that Jason Gorman mentioned of, if you don't want to learn it, I don't want to do business with you, right? So the issue with managerial pressure, in contrast to social pressure or leadership pressure, right? Leadership pressure might be, let's say, a staff engineer who is not your manager. That would be leadership pressure, right? So somebody more senior, whom you, for all points and purposes, consider a peer, but they float on like a different level than you do in the organization. That is healthy. So these kinds of testing initiatives coming from those areas are healthy, as long as the communication doesn't become toxic. As long as it's not, you're incompetent because you don't do TDD. Do you want to learn it? No. I don't want to work with you, right? So as long as it's not like that crude, not cold or manipulative in a sense.
I think we should clarify, first of all, discipline, because
can we turn off chat real quick, because we have very little real estate on like our we need to be very disciplined on.
No, it shall motivate other people to comment.
Okay, fair.
Discipline. So discipline. Many people think in discipline, I need to force myself to do something which I'm actually not willing to do. So that's in a way correct how we use it for today. The original meaning would be actually a part of the solution of the problem you just mentioned, because discipline comes from disciplina, comes from discipulus, which means basically the scholar person. It is basically the person who learns, right? So it comes from a Latin word, is very close to what Stoicism actually means as well. So a Stoic person, for example, is a person who constantly learns. So how will this help? So as good leaders, what we actually do is not start in the moment when we see we have quality issues. Leadership starts in the moment you exist in the company. You either are a leader or not. So which means that you need to make sure that there's an environment where people, out of intrinsic motivation, maturity, and ownership, actually start to tackle those problems by themselves. So ideally, they come up to the leadership and they say, yeah, we have these problems, and you go basically both sides towards each other. That's the ideal way, which means that everyone is disciplined, everyone wants to learn, and everyone wants to become continuously better. That is the continuous aspect of discipline, not I discipline you to do that. That is something different. That is a punishment. That is not discipline in its original sense. And I think that is one of the biggest issues we carried from the industrial age, where this shift happens in mindset, what discipline actually is, until today. Still, people, especially older than Generation X, is very much on, I need to do this, I don't need to complain, these kind of discipline ways. And that's wrong. You need to do that differently.
As a small tangent to discipline, I think discipline in this sense might be considered also a form of sacrifice, right? So, for example, a pro TDDer doesn't require discipline because they're not sacrificing anything, right? So They're not sacrificing something that they would like to do in order to do TDD because they like doing TDD.
But they become better in it as well, isn't it?
No, but so to contrast, sacrifice in this sense meaning that you need to stop doing something that you really want to do. Somebody who is against TDD or is in a unfriendly or unsupportive environment to practice TDD, they are incentivized to take the easy way out and just not do it. To them, they would need to sacrifice that in order to practice TDD. They would have to sacrifice their safety in like the default path in order to do TDD. So to a non-TDDer, a difficult environment, doing TDD requires sacrifice. And I use that example as a let's say a synonym for discipline in this scenario. But this is something that is temporary, only while you're on the bridge. Because a practicing TDDer does not require this. Because they're not sacrificing anything. It is their default mode of operation. So that's why it's obvious to them. So once you're, for example, if you're, I see we have Steven in the chat. Hey, Steven. We spoke to, for example, we have Nick Shoemaker, Paul Hammond in our community. They don't sacrifice anything for doing TDD because they love doing it. They know they got used to doing it well. I do need to take a quick bathroom break. I'm very sorry. I'm usually disciplined about this, but I can't focus unless I take a little 2-minute
Again,
break.
that has nothing to do with discipline. That has nothing to, you need to go for, that's not discipline. That's
Can you take over for a few minutes and maybe entertain
I'll
chat?
try. Maybe I've done that before. Let's take over.
Okay, and I'll be right back.
Oh my God! Now I'm alone. Okay. I actually, it was his thought, but so I want to get back to discipline, because discipline in that moment. So when we think about, hey, I need to be disciplined in order to do that, in my opinion, it's not the discipline which is actually necessary to do that. It is to create a culture where people have the need and urge to actually change something because they want to improve. So the willingness to improve should be something we have in software development anyway. If we don't want to improve things out of our own power, then, well, then we stop learning. And we need to be willing to learn in order to do the things right, in a right way. And this is where leadership comes in. Leadership needs to be that kind of mediator there to help people, credibility, role model, vision, and challenge. Those are the 4 pillars. And that is what often is missing. So it's not about the management. I was talking at the beginning of management, where you can set a frame, you can fire people, you can force people, but you shouldn't. That is the frame. That is like a contract. It is best contracts are basically somewhere you never look at them. Right? That's the best contract. And that's just a frame for something. But you need to have something more living, something every day. You get to work and you try to become better in what you do. That is what I personally do when I journal. So I define every morning who I want to be. And it is basically every time someone who learns something. And so discipliner, discipulus. I consider myself as a discipulus, which means that I'm a person who learns about things, who learns about myself, my issues, my problems. I reflect about those and I make decision about that. And if you implement a structure like this, a culture like this as a leadership person, then things become quite easy, because if you have that inside a team already lived, then most likely you don't have those issues where you suddenly need to step into, we need to do TDD now, we have such problems. So that is like more an optimization thing, where you say, okay, we do TDD because it is actually, or we want to do TDD because we already do testing, we do TLD, but we see it could improve ourselves. We want to set it up as a hypothesis and go for it, right? And just give it a try. Maybe it's better, maybe it's not. But that is based on the willingness to learn about if it's actually the better way or not. It is not just about someone is forcing me to do that. And there is where we actually need to go to, which means that instead of just going and say, okay, we've enforced something, we need to build a culture up front, even before the actual problem happens. Which means that this is not only for that case, it is basically for everything. Which means that you are less and less in need of an actual management person, because the team learns to manage itself, self-ownership, self-discipline. The team learns about what they do wrong, what they do right, and do the better things in the future, about self-reflections, right? It's not like you do need to do group meditations, right? Kneeling down or something. Don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about clearly that you should have the space for your team to communicate freely and debate. So Grant said that. Where is it? The porch, the stoa. That's where the Stoics are. The Stoics, a practical philosophy, came from Greece and became popular in the Western world later on because of people like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and others. And they debated, so they had open space for basically debates. So they had topics they want to talk about. They set up hypotheses and discuss those, right? So it is very practical. That is one of the aspects. It's not the theoretical things like Aristotle was doing back then, the typical, like the pure, let's say, statements about the entire state of human beings. That is not what it's about. So what we're talking here about is definitely that that the team should come up with several ideas, discuss that, and that should be the topic. So the leadership is actually something which happened before that issue, during that issue, and after that issue. It's an ongoing thing. So you never get to the point that we actually need to pull up the contracts and say, that was guideline, I need to fire you now. That should never happen. That's one of those points. If you are a good leader, you don't need to manage people. That's the point about it.
Yeah. Did you get to discuss Steven's comment?
Not yet, because that's more like your job.
So Steven says, hey y'all, I tried to do TDD in a SAFE team years ago. SAFE being the scaled agile framework extended, I believe. That's the right? SAFE. Yeah. SAFE agile. What's the E in SAFE? Scaled agile framework. Oh, the E is not capitalized. Okay, the E is not part of the acronym. It was difficult to be the only one on the team refactoring and cleaning up tests, so he left after 9 months. So, and I can sympathize with that. Like, I usually tell people, look, like, don't piss against the wind. Like, don't try to do it. And it's also why I, for example, when I'm coaching teams, I'm doing it in both directions. I'm doing it top down and bottom up, because you can't make it work bottom up, right? So what a lot of people miss, for example, in the anti-TDD camp, let's say I'm anti-TDD.
Totally.
And you're pro-TDD. I can stop you from doing TDD without communicating with you, simply by not running your tests. Right? So if you write a test, if you do TDD and you have tests, if I don't run them, my stuff might eventually break your stuff, and I don't run them. So when you continue to work, you're in that mentality of, when you check out your code base, it will be red. And you will prevent yourself from continuing to work until you fix it, because I broke it. And that generally requires a conversation. But if I don't want to have the conversation with you, or if I'm avoiding you, or if you're like, we are like hyper individuated in our work streams, and I have my stuff to work on and you have your stuff to work on, and I just accidentally broke yours, then you are now being, I don't know if that's what happened to Steven, but it is an example that I've seen countless times about how a non-interactive how a non-interaction can still be used as an implicit incentive to stop the TDDer from TDDing, right? So what's missing there? What's missing there is that for what I generally do, like as a proxy, is if I want to help a team, how I help a team approach adopting TDD or something TDD like, TDD adjacent, like something spec driven, is I first get them to pair if pairing is not a standard practice. Because the social pressure is much stronger than the managerial pressure, right? Because generally what TDD is good for is it is making the team more effective. So if I really simplify it down to like clear terms, we are trading time efficiency for making the team more effective. So basically, the old school specs work in such a way that an architect creates a spec and then the team builds what was spec'd out, because then the architect can work with some other team starting something that interfaces with this team's work. As long as they follow the spec, they then have clear interfaces that they can work with. But all this really does is just creates a document saying, while we are not done, we agree to follow the specification. So what does this look like for two engineers who are peers? Well, it basically looks like, I will work on this, and you can test in my absence whether the code I wrote works. That's the social benefit of TDD, right? So I can explain to you what I want to build. I will codify that in a test. And if I have to go pick up my kids from daycare, which you can probably hear because they just got home, if they're just right outside of my door. If I write down what I want from the behavior as a executable specification, you can check whether my code works. So I can get sick, I can leave the company, and you can verify whether I have followed through on my commitment. So I am giving you a cheap test to verify whether I have done the expensive implementation correctly. So whether I have done it and whether I have done it correctly. And if you disagree with the test, you can even verify if I have misunderstood the assignment. So if you disagree with how I wrote the test, you can even have a higher level conversation with me about, hey, Dennis, I don't think that's what we need to build. I think you got it wrong. Right? So it's that level of us, me and my pairing partner, holding each other accountable to, hey, did we miss the understanding? Did we miss the implementation? Did we miss the execution? Did we miss the compilation step? Did we miss something that the linter said? Did we misunderstand? Did the conversation and the AI generated meeting notes differ when we were talking to the subject matter expert? And I just, I heard different parts to be important than you did. That's the primary benefit, right? So when I try to get a team to adopt TDD, TDD is not my first stop. My first stop to a anti-team is, do you guys pair? Like, can you guys work together? If you guys work together, how do you make sure that if I have to break up the pair, how do you make sure that the pair continues along their intended goals without requiring a meeting afterwards to get back together?
Let's phrase the question quite easily. Hello, team. Are you actually a team?
Yes, but I know, but sometimes that's a more complicated topic. I like bringing it just down to a pair, because a pair is not a team. A pair is a pair, right? So generally a pair reports to somebody, and
when you have two people in a team, it's pretty much a team. Oof. So a team indicates that multiple people work towards the same mission. That's actually the case. So that's the task. Let's say a small mission defines, you know what I mean? It's a little bit like the issue, what I'm hearing, my own experience and what you just said is the very same thing. So it is the issue that people are assuming that when I do TDD, right, there is a new thing, which is a connection to the work of someone else. I need to synchronize, people see what I do. Maybe I'm exposed, shame, all these kind of negative aspects coming from the ego again, the resistance to change, blah, blah, blah. That is the issue. And a team which is used to work together, right, it is normal that you actually talk about those things, and it's normal that someone is doing something. It might not be perfect, and this is what Brian Finster is often saying as well. This is like, I don't really care. He said that in the aspect of AI generated code, as long as the AI generated code is not breaking the tests, it's actually not that bad as people say. And I agree to that, because, it is like everyone is now blaming AI. Not everyone, but many people are blaming AI in a very strange way. Because while they're doing that, they suddenly don't talk about the topic, which was ongoing for 20 years, where people fighting each other about programming styles, coding styles, structuring styles.
Tests.
That is suddenly gone. AI is bad, and we are all good. No, we are not. It is still the same concept. So we still have
So,
multiple ways to see things, and there are multiple valid ways.
so just to recap real quick. Just to recap real quick. So the last point was number 3 was introduce pairing as a proxy. So use peer pressure to help against the incentive of, if it's somebody solo trying to do TDD, there's a bunch of everybody in the org who is not doing it can accidentally pressure them to stop doing it just by not running their tests. Or by ignoring their tests, or by not addressing flaky tests, or by etc., etc., etc. That's that. The second thing is stop using managerial pressure, right? So use leadership pressure if available, or use peer and social pressure, so that we can all agree on like how we're approaching it, how we're not approaching it. And number 1, get more buy-in by not talking about TDD, but the output that we want, which is usually some kind of proxy for self-testing code, or a piece of software that can diagnose itself for the core behaviors in a way that it localizes an error when it is off spec. And then if the engineers find a crafty solution that is not TDD, good, let them run that experiment. In my experience, when that happens, that is already a healthy sign that this is a team that is capable of learning, and they will generally gravitate towards TDD or something better. So those are like the 3 key points for change management. One point that I would like to add that might not be super obvious, or it might just be a little bit more sticky or contentious, is that people ask me, hey, should I do a workshop? Should I do a conference? Should I do a TDD, whatever? And I always say no. Because joining now the camps of pro TDD and anti TDD, I would always say, please do not do TDD in a greenfield environment. You are wasting your time doing TDD, trying to learn TDD in a greenfield environment. If you're doing some kind of kata or some kind of example, that code base of that kata, of that example, needs to be at least as complex and as messy as your production environment. Because the ultimate question, the ultimate process, the ultimate process that you should be optimizing for is truth seeking. It's trying to find the truth about, hey, why is doing TDD in this component difficult? And to help people have the conversation to uncover the truth of, well, it's hard because of that dependency and this dependency. Okay, well, how do we isolate those dependencies? How do we isolate the need for this? What makes this process complex? Is the complexity an essential part of what it does? Does the customer see it that way as well? Or is this just an implementation detail that became a monster of its own, and the implementation details have adopted such a strong identity that we can't separate them out from what the customer is doing with the software, right? So those are those natural consequences that you want the entire team to talk about, because everybody will have a million different reasons for why they think they can't practice TDD in their code base today, now, and on their next task. And those questions, those answers, are the only relevant thing that really matters. In my experience as a coach, as a life coach, as a agile coach, as a technical coach, when people say I don't know enough TDD, that is just an imposter response to thinking they're not good enough and they
Great,
struggle
great
adopt.
starting point for a journey to learn it.
No, but my point is
it?
I don't know enough TDD to practice it in my code base is an anxiety response, is a procrastination response to actually to avoid and to excuse make doing truth seeking in your code base. Right? So it is not a healthy response. If you feel I don't know enough about TDD, I should go learn it, that is actually the wrong approach.
But
Because
there's an important aspect here. The anxiety.
hang on. Let me cook and then you can respond. Please. So I'm not saying that is wrong in isolation. I'm saying that is wrong. Instead, what the reframing that I find useful is the environment that we have set up, the setup, the architecture, everything surrounded in everything surrounding our content, our code base, our process for making software, our managerial processes are incentivizing us in some way to experience TDD as being difficult in this environment. So obviously, we need to not only figure out why it's hard, but we need to figure out it's hard and we should do this instead. That is hard and we should do this instead. So usually, TDD is hard because of some other aspects of design, of architecture, of collaboration, of the way that you plan your work, the way that streams coincide, work streams align with value streams, etc., how you do sprint plannings. It's all of those little details that are like related or tangential to actual TDD that are not an expression of how good you are at practicing TDD, but they are the core reason why you're not training it, or why you're not learning it by usage. Right? So that you will not, if you have these natural obstacles, you will never adopt TDD if you get better at TDD, because it's those other things you need to get better at, not TDD. TDD you will get better at once you start practicing it. So your primary focus should be to remove the blockers that prevent you from practicing it, right? Not getting better at this skill, not this hard skill, but all the other hard skills.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they're soft skills. That's the hard part there. Okay, you wanted to say something?
It is, in fact, so people are not really afraid that they cannot do TDD. It's like they cannot do TDD as good as that others would actually respect them as they respect this person right now. So it is the fear of degradation in social acknowledgement, in credibility. Those kind of fears are extremely deeply rooted, because it is the let's say like being thrown out of your own tribe. That is an extremely, let's say, painful anxiety we can develop, and we have that. Of course, we have a role somewhere. We want to keep that role. We want to keep the position in a team, in a company. We want to go ahead, and we see that, okay, I'm not in an environment which is actually improving every day. So everyone is basically where they are every day. And then suddenly there is this new thing where I need to improve, but we are all not used to do that. So I still keep my anxiety here. And that is where leadership needs to kick in, because you wouldn't even have the discussion about TDD, right? A team which is in fact ownership driven, which doesn't have or remove those anxieties very early on, is actually going anyway to the method which is working best for the team, and it is very often TDD. So that's the reason why teams like teams where you see high performing teams, so it's not about the individual 10x, you need to have 10x teams, right? If you have that, then it is very likely that people are going there anyway, and they have removed all the obstacles. It's not like they are performing because they are, based on hard skills, better than others. They have just removed the blocks which prevented them from becoming good. That's the entire point. And most of the time, people don't do that by themselves. That's very rarely. I see that very rarely. Most of the time, it needs a person who is mediating that, leading that by the four pillars of leadership: credibility, being a role model, vision, mission, and challenge. And by doing those kind of things, constantly, discipline every day, constantly as a learning person, you will get to the point that you actually don't need this management person anymore, this leadership person, right? You don't need management of a team. You don't need an external force actually doing things, because you have removed all the roadblocks and you have created a lot of smaller leaders, right? Who are actually doing, next to their normal job, a lot of self discipline, self leadership as a team. That's the reason why they need to understand themselves as a team with one mission. So when they do this, they understand their mission as well. So they can work towards the mission and get that done, the contract principle. So they have the contract to get that mission done and not dictated by a person, which this always leads to the point that a management person is telling a single person what to do, which creates isolation.
And it also has to do with seniority, coming together with your point about having that level of discipline and support all around, like 360 support, and using leadership pressure or peer pressure, social pressure, rather than managerial pressure. It also comes down to this idea of, like, don't have your most senior people, the CTO, the staff engineers, mandate the need for TDD and then have the junior engineers figure it out. Because that's silly, right? Because you haven't addressed any of the other pressures, and now you're asking the junior engineers to do a hard task, and what will they do? They will only make progress if the space where they're working at is extremely easy. So you're baiting them into wanting greenfield projects, like simple greenfield projects where they can do something simple in a TDD manner. But if they don't know how to interact with their complex legacy system, they will never build that bridge. So I think one of the best approaches that I found from like a top-bottom exercise from an anti-team, a team that might say they want to do TDD, but they have a million excuses for why they're not doing it every day, is to first of all sort of mandate that they don't practice TDD on easy greenfield problems, such that the TDD practice needs to be on only complex, nasty, mission-critical software where there's an important feature being done, and your most senior person should be in there running the whole thing, so that TDD happens on the most important thing, not on the like easy stuff. Especially if you have to make like time trade-offs about when you are learning it and when you're not learning it, do it first thing in the morning on the most important critical thing, that is roadmap.json, that is touching mission critical software, and try to learn as much as you can in that environment. Because then you can also bridge the gap from like a managerial aspect of, well, if we want self-testing code, we also at the same time need to stop doing something which is the antonym of self-testing code, which is code that can only be verified if it works or not by deploying it to staging and then manually testing it. So you incentivize this behavior with, hey, this mission critical thing needs to be verifiable for correct behavior without a human. So that is then a good mandate. Mandate that on a core domain problem, rather than asking for, I don't know, desk coverage or do TDD at least twice per week, because that's just driving people nuts, and it doesn't really drive adoption up. So right, so just make it extremely concrete and have the most senior people own, hey, for verifying whether that important business critical thing works, I want 0 humans in the pipeline to verify that that actually works, especially when we're changing it. So, and again, not as a means of regression testing, but as a means of making sure that new development on it, bug fixes, are stable and simple and are relying on that self-testing mechanism to iterate and make progress.
We should go through comments.
Yeah, let's go through comments. You also said you have to go. How much time do you have, Adrian?
5 minutes around about.
5 minutes thereabout. Okay, let's do a quick. I see Kaloyan. We didn't do a restaurant metaphor yet. We did do resistance, so you're a bit late for that, Kaloyan.
Please. So let's go through the pinned comments. Do you see them now or not?
I see what's on screen. So Tell me if there's something you want to reference that I don't see on screen.
I just push myself a little bit up so I'm still visible. Okay. Practices like a doctor washing their hands, hygiene for code. So that was a little bit.
I don't like the clean code analogies when it comes to TDD. I just have to.
But that's not clean code. That's more hygiene, isn't it?
So
you
I
do
don't
things
like
because it's necessary.
I don't like this attitude of craft when it comes to self-testing code. I think self-testing code has nothing to do with craft. You can write freaking ugly code and it can still be self-testing.
Yeah, self-testing is one aspect. The willingness of a person intrinsically to do the things right is another thing. And I agree with Brent.
This is a really old comment. I think this was referring to like that talk about discipline and sacrifice. Sorry, Grant. I miss.
Another one from Grant. Let me go through all of them. I agree. Pairing always means you are more aware of the practices you should do.
Mm-hmm. I think pairing. I don't find any negatives for pairing, honestly, in any team that I work with. Like the number one thing. I had a talk about this on How to Web last year about, look, if you want to adopt TDD, just mandate pairing. Like, don't mandate TDD. I think we have a question on that. You mandate TDD by mandating pairing instead, and then drive like clear. If you have OKRs, OKR aligned incentives for an OKR could be how many of our critical systems are self-testing. Self-testing meaning that their correct behavior can be verified without a human doing it manually, right? That could be an OKR. That can be a non-functional requirement or some kind of SLA guarantee. And you can mandate that, and you can let the team figure out if they want to do that with TDD or with some expensive end-to-end regression suite, right? So it's ultimately, I think you get the most out of TDD adoption by just not focusing too much on TDD. TDD is just an output of the team taking stability seriously. So you should really be talking about stability or sustainability of your engineering process. The example I like to use is, if I code something and my kid gets sick, I want you to be able to pick it up with minimal interference. I want you to be able to unexpectedly continue my work that I have not finished without talking to me. Right? So it's just it's a sustainability practice. But like, how easy? Yeah, it's like, how easy is it for us to have people, go on vacation, get sick, have an emergency, get reprioritized, or some part of the team being reteamed or cannibalized for resources because there's an urgent, an outage or an incident. I think that's just good practice. So I think that is also adjacent to like ISO certifications regarding your bookkeeping and the stability of your processes and the documentation involved with your processes, whether you have standard operating procedures. So I think TDD is just an output and a organizational identity for how do you, what is your standard operating procedure for collaborating on software. I think that's what it really is about. It's to me, it's not about writing the test. Again, there is some finesse about writing the tests behaviorally without involving implementation. That is a very different hard skill that you then adopt once you have the need for it. But you will not learn how to be better at, testing behavior versus testing implementation if you don't have the need for that knowledge. And you won't have that need for that knowledge if you're actively avoiding an excuse making why you're not practicing TDD. Keith. It's Keith Azzopardi. It's a new face. It's a new name. I don't recognize it. Let me ask again. How do you mandate TDD in an organization if you're selective about the features where TDD is applied? So I would say don't mandate TDD. I would say define a new OKR for it if you're using OKRs. Right? If you're not using OKRs, just have an experiment. Run an initiative that says, hey, we want our core mission critical infrastructure to be
a goal. Just define
a goal. Yeah, like we want our core mission critical infrastructure to be self-testing, and it's 2% right now. We want it to be 10% by end of quarter. Core mission critical infrastructure means this. Core features means this, self-testing means this, and you measure it by this, right? So you just define it, and you don't really talk about TDD. Maybe the team figures it out how to do it without it. Maybe it's expensive if they don't do TDD, and then eventually, if they take it seriously long enough, they will figure out that, hey, actually, this is not sustainable. Well, what's the easy way of doing this? And the answer is TDD. So just don't give them the answer. And TDD is not the only answer that solves this problem. Just formulate and frame the question in a way that allows them agency and ownership of answering the question without you mandating TDD. Deep down, everybody knows we're talking about TDD. Even the team will know that we're talking about TDD, but they will sort of drop their guard and should not be resistant to the idea if you're just not constantly pressuring them to do TDD. Because if you say TDD to an engineers, all they think about is, I have 7 complex dependencies in my constructor, and how do I do TDD if I have that? And if you just start talking about TDD, all they obsess about is that, and that is the least important part about what they need to learn.
I need to go.
You need to go. Cool.
You can keep on, so you have some audience if you like.
I also need to go. So, Keith, thank you so much. Hemant has joined on Substack. I've been very actively looking at chat. Thank you so much for being here. We had quite a few viewers on YouTube and a lot of people on LinkedIn.
I like the chat feature in that way, to be honest. It is motivating people to do something. By the way, today we had streams to 2 LinkedIn places. And just as a short feedback, the original event had just 2 people in it right now and just no comments. And the version streaming to my profile just had 6, 7, 8 people on it and all the comments.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes. So we usually did it on like one and then the other, and
only the event actually.
Yeah, only the event.
The part which wasn't running, and we had this issue that these things weren't running at all. And now we even have people like Keith, which is he was not following me, I was not following him, and he still joined via my profile in. So that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, we should follow up with Keith.
Hello. So it's not. I really like that because we do that now every time, because that is a missing key aspect we missed regarding LinkedIn and its policies, how to stream.
We're iterating a little bit on our technology.
Yeah.
If you need to go, you can go. I'll wrap up. I'll give this last question a little bit more context because I would like to finish on it.
Goodbye. See you, everyone. I just removed myself. Goodbye.
I wanted to say don't hit the red button. Thank you for not hitting the red button. And Keith, thank you for the question. I just want to put it back on screen to have a little bit more context. So I think, on an organizational level, I can see that you're a CTO, Keith. Like on an organizational level, I think your mandate to the engineers from like a strategic perspective should primarily be, and again, I don't know what your relationship with product is, because maybe product is running prioritization and resource management. Maybe you as CTO is running that, right? So that is always a tricky relationship about, there is work that is not customer facing, that is just keeping the lights on with regards to engineering practice. And then there is work which is customer facing with regards to features. And then there is work that is infrastructure facing with regards to supporting the customer facing features, right? So that's usually the triad of what you need to go through as like a strategic person, like as a CTO, regardless of the scale of the company, right? So from your perspective, you're wasting your time mandating TDD because the easier approach is to figure out who wants to do TDD and then what's preventing them from doing TDD in your organization. So you just have one-on-ones with your staff engineers, one-on-ones with your seniors, and just ask them if they want to do it. And if they do want to do it, what's preventing them? Then get them in the room, have them discuss it in a way that leads to action, and then just apply those actions. Just have an expectation of them to like, hey, if there's something preventing us from doing TDD, please make sure you take action every week, every day on those core things that are preventing us from applying TDD, right? So don't make the focus, please apply TDD now, because that's not actionable. What is actionable is, we can't do TDD because we're on such an old version of Python that we want to use PyCharm's I don't know, PyTest integration, and our Python in our project is so old that there is no compatible integration anymore. We don't want to do the old clunky code base, or our CI tool does not have a test runner for the language we're using. Like, so just figure out what the core issues are, and ultimately you will get down to like the core objections. The core objections for TDD adoption are usually, I think it slows me down. So I'm under pressure. Product is breathing down my neck, or the micromanaging CEO is breathing down my neck. So I can't do TDD because it slows me down. Again, that is what they say. That doesn't mean that TDD slows them down. That just means that they are under pressure, and a talented engineer under pressure will always make stupid decisions. So don't judge them for the decision of not wanting to do TDD. Make sure they stop being under pressure. And maybe the pressure is self-inflicted. Maybe they're just used to the pressure, and even if you remove the micromanagement or whatever is causing the pressure, they will still apply the pressure to each other, because everybody in the team has normalized being under pressure so much that it's weird if somebody's not under pressure. So the peer pressure takes over as like a pressure valve for lack of managerial pressure, so people don't get lazy, or they expect to be punished, and there's all kinds of dysfunctions going on in teams like that, right? So the main objection is product is breathing down my neck. I feel under pressure, so I want to do TDD. The core objection, well, what's creating the pressure? Take care of the pressure. Use them to have conversations, to figure out what's bothering them, and then you step in to make sure that what's bothering them goes away. Don't ask them to make the thing that's bothering them go away, because it's probably your job as CTO, Keith. The other core objection to TDD practices is I want to do TDD, but I am working in an environment that is not testable. So there might be some fuzziness to it, or it might just be like 7 different, like it might be integrating with Stripe, and then integrating with an AI, and then integrating with some other third party. And then your software is just a data product that is sort of connecting these. And there is a huge level of non-determinism in your work, or it's front end, right? So again, non-determinism, it's a little bit fuzzy. So the second core objection is, well, what I'm doing is not logically testable. So why should I waste time trying to get it under those constraints? And I will always, communicate with this regard. And well, what does the user use the software for? Because this objection is an objection for, I'm so deep down in the weeds of implementation that I have no idea what the user's expectations are. That is the core objection. Not that it's non-deterministic. It's just that I have no idea how the user perceives the implementation. So when you get down to this core objective, this is coachable. This is usually a disconnect between somebody is gatekeeping engineers from having access to customers. So the engineers don't know how their product is being used. So obviously they don't know how to formulate useful tests. That is worth exploring, right? I'm not saying you'll have all 3 of these core objections, but you will definitely have at least one of them. And usually I've worked with so many teams. All of the high-performing teams are mostly the same. And all of the dysfunctional teams are uniquely different because they have unique dysfunctions. Every person in their team will carry their own baggage, and everybody will have different unique styles of objections. But ultimately, they cluster together in one of these or several of these 3. The last one being the objection of incentives. So the first one was pressure. The second one was, I have no idea how the user thinks about my software. And the third one is, I'm incentivized to not own the software. Right? For example, in a push-oriented leadership structure, you might say, hey, we need to work on 2 things. We have enough people to work on one. So you create this sort of quasi multitasking roadmap where you say, okay, October, you work on this thing. And then when you launch it, you stop working on this thing and you start working on that other thing. So by the time feedback arrives on the thing you did last week, nobody's available to receive it, and the feedback is actually being cataloged by product or QA or somebody else, and you are now being tasked with working on something else. So you are completely blind to the feedback. So when you finish this thing, probably this thing comes back on your radar, and enough time passes for you to forget why you made those decisions and what those trade-offs were and why you wanted to build it that way, right? So you're incentivizing the team to never own what they build. So they will always make decisions based on recency or primacy bias. So bias on what happened just now or what happened at the beginning of the project. And the important stuff is everything that happens in the middle. And you're incentivizing them to like drop their IQ levels for that important stuff in the middle. So you're only really discussing the end of the project and the beginning of the project. And mostly it's going to be about staffing and estimates, right? So you're wasting their IQ, you're wasting their high IQ moments by talking about the prioritization concerns of trying to cram 2 value streams into 1 work stream, if that analogy makes sense in your context, right? Because ultimately what they should be acting on is, well, we have 1 work stream. We can either have one of them and the other one we will permanently not do. Like we will kill that project. We want product to stop asking for it. And if that cannot happen, then we have a staffing issue. So if we have a staffing issue, we need to take quality more seriously because we can't afford delays caused by bug fixes. And if we can't afford delays caused by bug fixes, we need to own the software we build, not just deliver it and publish it and then go work on something else, right? So the incentive you will be getting from this is that if you push tasks down to a team, you're incentivizing them to not want to do TDD because TDD creates an assumption of, hey, you need to make the software cheap to maintain, while at the same time you're communicating to them that maintenance is none of their business. Just do the task that's being pushed to you. And then when product pushes down, a bug fix that needs to be done urgently while they're no longer on the project, they're working on it under pressure for like a month, then there's a huge gap, and then they have like an urgent bug fix. And this kind of structure will always lead to sort of them not being, smart enough and, at the right place at the right time to actually take it seriously, to go to look at the whole picture and say, no, like if the code was self-testing, the bug fix would be cheaper. And the self-testing part would have to happen in that part of the project when they are being asked to work on something else. And then they just keep, it's like scatter gather, and they just keep doing that in different generations, multitasking on like different cycles of the same project style over and over and over again as like an infinite game. And you never get better at maintaining software. You just get really good at building the first iteration and then abandoning it. So a team that is incentivized to build the first iteration very quickly and then abandon the software will never have the natural incentive to get better at bug fixing faster, because there's another project that they enjoy building for the first time, right? So you're just helping them excuse make to not take the practice seriously. So there's no point mandating it, right? Because you're mandating something else as a cheaper, easier, sexier alternative of how they should be spending their time. Okay, so those are the 3 core objections, right? The core objections of, well, let's not recap the recap. I already recapped. I will actually write it down and do a little written summary from the video. I think that will be much more practical. Cool. Thank you so much, Grant. It's been lovely to see you. Caroline, thanks for joining, even if it was a little bit later. Simon, I saw you joining on Substack. Keith, Stephen, thank you so much for participating live in chat. I will have another episode without Adrian, so it won't be OTJ, but I will be having a observability focused stream with John Gallagher. John Gallagher is a dear friend and also one of my clients, and he's now on a mission to talk about observability, and we're having a get-together tomorrow at noon Vienna time to talk about observability. So it's going to be adjacent to this, but it's going to be a lot more technical to some degree, but also with Ruby on Rails focus, because that's his specialty. If you're interested in that, please be on the lookout on my LinkedIn. And yeah, we'll see you again for OTJ next week. We will announce it probably at the beginning of the next week, so we can book it. It's going to be 4 p.m. on Wednesday again. For those of you in the US, you are having daylight saving this weekend. We already had it last weekend, so there will be something goofy going on with regards to your calendar. All you need to know is that we are always streaming at 4 p.m. Vienna time, Berlin time, Budapest time, Ljubljana time, so that you can adapt to that if you're in doubt. Thank you so much, and wish you all a nice evening, and see you next week. Ciao.